Alex, we didn't address the rollers. You're getting ready for a photo shoot. So thank you for making time. We should have said something at the beginning. I have to move this to the beginning. We're going to talk about boundaries today. And what are you doing, honey?
I'm making sure you focus because I just pressed record.
This is great. And please don't edit any of this out.
Some of it's getting edited out. Some of it.
Fine.
Guilt-free boundaries and how to have hard conversations. That's what my guest and I are talking about in today's video. Some of the biggest conflicts in my personal life grew so big simply because I wasn't good at communicating my intentions, my concerns, my needs, or maybe the most important part, my boundaries. So I called on my very dear friends, Elizabeth DiAlto, creator of Wild Soul Movement, author of Untame Yourself, and host of the Truth Telling podcast. Yeah, telling the truth. And Alexandra Jamieson, co-creator of the Oscar-nominated documentary Super Size Me, and best-selling author of Women, Food, and Desire, and co-author of Getting to Hell Yes, my favorite book of the moment, to chat about just that. How to communicate effectively and with kindness for self and others. I am so excited about sharing this conversation with you, so I hope you enjoy it. Please leave your comments below and be sure to check out the video description for all the links and resources we mentioned in our conversation.
Today we're talking about boundaries and how to have honest conversations and how to be direct in our communication. And you two are the experts in this. I have been coaching people and lately every single issue seems to have its roots in the fact that they're not communicating honestly in their lives, or they're not telling the truth to themselves. So this is a huge topic that we're going to try to cover in under 30 minutes. And I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth. Truth telling. The question is, because I often say to the people that I'm coaching, but in a very loving way, that we're all liars. We're all liars, and it's our job to show or to examine how we're lying in our own lives, to free ourselves, to liberate ourselves from the trappings that lying puts on us. I don't know how you feel about that statement, but when I hear you talk about truth telling and sell this idea of telling the truth, it feels like freedom to me, and I want to know what it means to you.
So this is really interesting. I see people post things like this sometimes, like we're all lying to ourselves in some way. And for me, the word lying doesn't resonate because I feel like we're all so growing and evolving so rapidly and taking in so much information these days just by nature of like how digital media and communication works, that our understanding of like life, the world, and ourselves, especially if you're any kind of like introspective person who's into like growth and healing, that like our understanding is just like shifting and changing like literally 100,000 times a day. That's not literal. That's very much of an exaggeration. So I don't know that I resonate with lying, but like the gist of it is, sure, like I might say something in this interview and then hang up and be like, you know what? I actually changed my mind about that. So, I always say I reserve the right to change my mind. But to me, truth telling is moment by moment, being honest about what's real for you, what's going on, what is your truth, but also always with like kindness and compassion, which by the way, being fierce and being honest is kind and compassionate. It's just going to trigger the F out of people who aren't being that way. So often I'll get responses from people that are like, that's mean, or like, that person was just being nice. But like, being nice isn't always being kind. And being nice isn't always harmless. So like, there's a bunch of different factors here. But to me, it's most about like being honest, but also having discernment. Like, what needs to be shared and with whom and when, and most importantly, honoring, your own process.
Yeah, I think that when I use the word, thank you for that. I think that when I use the word lying, for me, it's just being out of integrity with what you know to be true. So it's not about, figuring out how to navigate, what's going on in your life or a certain circumstance and stumbling along the way. It's like, I have this I have this thought about something, I have this feeling about something, I have this desire, and I'm not communicating it honestly, or I'm saying something that's completely out of alignment of what it is, or I'm not setting a boundary and then getting mad at the person when they cross it. You know, or they cross my imaginary boundary that I made up in my head, but I never actually stated out loud. So that's what lying means to me. It's just like incongruence. It's being out of integrity. And I know it's a really harsh word. I use it to kind of shock people into that, like, wait a minute, you're calling me a liar? To understand how harmful it is. Even those little white lies, like, they do a lot of harm, and we make excuses and justifications for these lies that we tell. And, you know, they hurt other people, they hurt ourselves, because it creates this discord in our relationships and this prolonged pain. And it doesn't have to be that way if we just got direct about it. I love that you said that, you know, that lying is, or not lying, that truth telling is kindness. And I know that, Alex, in Getting to Hell Yes, you say that boundaries are actually kind, that they're compassionate. And I love that, because so many of us feel like setting a boundary makes us selfish or bitchy or mean. And it's just not the case. Tell me more about setting boundaries, and I guess how your experience from being someone who maybe didn't set boundaries so well, and the difference in the quality of your life now that you do.
Man, I love talking with you too, because I'm just listening and learning so much. I was simultaneously very unclear about boundaries growing up, but I also had one parent who was an incredible role model in setting boundaries. And
which one was that?
My dad was a high school principal for 25 years. And he brought a non-judgmental, non-emotional stance to, these are the rules and these are the boundaries. And you knew what the repercussions would be if you crossed his boundaries, etc. But it was just really clear. And there wasn't judgment or shaming around it, in my experience. I don't know if my brother had the same experience. But they change. Boundaries change.
Yes.
And I love that you both acknowledge that I reserve the right to change my opinion or change my boundary. We have to allow that and begin to have that conversation, I think, with the people that we engage in this with. When Bob, my husband, and I were writing Getting to Hell Yes about this, we had to get really clear about, like, how do we work with our boundaries as a couple and as a family with our son? And I realized, like, first of all, we talk about them. We have a vocabulary around it, what they are. And I don't know if I took this from somebody else or if I made it up myself. So if I need to attribute someone, let me know. But I like to think of boundaries as a line across which I don't want to go, and a line across which others are not welcome.
I love that.
And you don't know what your boundaries are often until you go past them. So we have to have compassion for ourselves and the people that we engage in our regular lives about this, because you might step over somebody's boundaries and be like, oh my God, like, I didn't know, or they didn't tell me. And have your awareness around it, apologize, and do better. And for yourself as well, like, oh, that was a boundary and you crossed it, or I crossed it. Now I know what it is. Here's what it is. Let's all be aware of this.
That's such a good point, because we think of boundaries as kind of a protection, like a wall of protection that we don't want people to come in or to step over. But we rarely think of them, and I didn't even, as something that I really don't want to cross. I do that in another way, where I have these kind of promises that I make to myself, and what they really are boundaries on how I want to behave. So one of them is, like, I don't yell at my kids. That doesn't mean that I never yell at my kids. It's that when I cross that boundary, though, because it's set, I have that awareness, and then I can self-correct. And in that way, it is a protection for myself, because it's protection of my own integrity and my own desires. So I love that you talk about it going both ways. And something that's married to boundaries, and I know that we talk about this all the time, and it's something that I've put into my practice very consciously with great effort, is consent. So boundaries and consent, they go together. So in establishing boundaries, there's also that conversation of, can I do this? Can I step over? Can I go there? I mean, I was engaged in a lot of tension around a conversation with someone from my church group the other day. And she was upset and I was upset and she was crying and I was crying. It was a lot. It was a lot for church. And I went home. I chose not to say as much as I wanted to in that moment. And I went home and I texted her and I said, do you have space to talk about what happened? If you don't, it can wait. But do. Before I just said, I really need to talk about what happened in this. I just asked her permission to even enter the conversation. And that's new in my life. And it feels good. It
feels good because we're respecting and honoring people and dignifying people and not putting our needs above other people's needs. Fairly often, this is why we need boundaries, because it's, and you know, this is where I have a lot of compassion for people. Everyone has so much going on, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone has like a host of all kinds of things going on any given day, any given moment. And by asking and just that check-in, it's so considerate. And even that feels so good for someone to just take that moment to go, hey, do you even have space for this right now? And you're like, I know when people do that with me, I'm like, thank you so much for asking. Like, no, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And listen, if anyone is any kind of recovering codependent or people pleaser, our natural wiring wants to caretake. Like before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the distinction between like caring. Because I care, I'm going to want to smooth out the situation as soon as humanly possible, right?
Yeah.
But when I don't have the space for it, if I step into that caring, that's caretaking, and that's not honoring me and the space that I have.
Yeah, and it's really not honoring the other person because it's not honest and true and in alignment with the intention to have or the desire to have this real partnership and this real equality. You said the word dignity, and I had to look up on my phone because I am listening right now to I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown, and I'll put a link to that in the video description because it's an easy listen, it's a quick read. But she speaks about maintaining her identity and her dignity in this world that really wasn't created for her. And when we put our desires, our needs over the desire to have harmony in the relationship or to see the other person or for the other person to have a voice, it robs them of their dignity. Yeah. And how beautiful does it feel when someone sees you and honors you? And that was the word. It was dignity, because it feels like I have been stripped of my dignity when someone steps over my boundary. When I've said something like, don't do this thing. Don't do this thing. Here are the rules. Like this is, I've been very, very literal in my ask. And then they step over it. It's like, you don't even see me as human anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you commented on one of my Facebook posts the other day where I specifically asked someone, I'm like, please don't comment any further here. She was completely derailing the post. Mm-hmm. And then she did. And I guess you saw what she wrote. I didn't, because as soon as I saw it, I just deleted it because I had asked her not to. So it's like, okay, you crossed my boundary. I owe you nothing now. Mm-hmm. Especially a stranger on the internet who I've never even seen your name on one of my posts before.
Yeah. That happened to me yesterday. Someone did that on an Instagram post, and I let them have their voice because I don't create posts and conversations for it to be an echo chamber. I do set up rules around the way that we engage in the post, like respectfully and, like use the right language, but they kept posting and I said, okay, I get your point. You've been heard here. You answered everyone else's comments. Like you are seen, and there's no need to say anything else here. Like you stop, please, no more posting. And then they continued. And I had to block them. And I hate doing that. I hate silencing people because when I block someone, then all of their comments are lost. Right. But it really wasn't adding anything to the conversation anyway. It was about centering them and their opinion. And it wasn't something that wasn't already represented in the thread. Like, I get it. Mm. And, when they crossed that boundary repeatedly, I could see that it wasn't even about them wanting to talk to me or have a conversation with me. It was really them just wanting to say what they had to say. And it was disappointing. And I don't want that. So I would say too, when we create rules and boundaries, it's also up to the other person to decide if they want to follow them, and then they don't have to mess with us. You know, like if you don't like the way that I play, you can walk away. That's fine too. I try not to be a person who isn't open to other voices, but when people tell, you know, it's when people tell you who they are, believe them. And I know lots of people who set up boundaries and parameters for the way that they want to interact that I'm not cool with. And then I just don't deal with them. That's okay too.
Yeah.
Alex, you have a son who's adorable, and we talk about him a lot offline. How do you have conversations with him about because I have a lot of women and a lot of mothers in my audience around setting up boundaries for himself and advocating for himself? And I know this has been a theme that we've been talking about lately too.
Just today.
Yeah.
I actually started it when he was really young, and I didn't know I was doing it until later. So I was channeling my dad, apparently. I started to ask him, what is a good friend? Because he was already in pre-K, was getting teased. I think there's just a culture of teasing out there that crosses a lot of people's boundaries.
Yes.
Teasing, tickling, all that stuff that we do to kids that they're supposed to accept and supposed to just acquiesce to. And we had pretty strong boundaries around that in our family that were well stated. And when he got to pre-K, he was really upset with this other kid who was not respecting my kid's space. And I said, well, what makes a good friend? What is a good friend to you? Just to get him thinking about how he wanted to be treated and how he thinks he should treat other people who he thinks are his friends.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we started the conversation. And it's definitely evolved over time. It's gotten a lot more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And now we talk about boundaries, whereas we used to just talk about what do you like and what do you not like, and how do you know when you've been disrespected? How does it feel? How do you know when a boundary has been crossed in you? Because it's something that I think it's so often a felt experience.
Yeah.
Even when it's not a physical boundary that's been crossed, we feel it somehow. And I think that's something that all three of us talk about with our clients and in our work, reconnecting us with our bodies so that we can listen to her and her wisdom and her red flags that our boundaries have been crossed. It's an early body communication thing.
When we intellectualize boundaries, it gets really messy because of the messages that we've been hearing since day one, since we were born as women in this society. So when we intellectualize boundaries, it's intermixed with being good, being nice, being palatable, being acceptable. And that's where it starts to morph into, but I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And the truth telling as well. I want to protect this person, so I'm not going to tell them how I really feel about them or how I really feel about myself or this situation. When we talk about feelings, especially to kids, because they're so connected, like they haven't really separated that yet. Talk about feelings like, does that feel good to you? Does it feel nice? Does it feel comfortable? Does it make you smile? Does it make your belly hurt? Like describe the feelings when you hear that person say that to you or you're in that situation. And then it becomes so easy. And starting when they're little, they'll learn that habit. And I know just because I've done it with you in person, Elizabeth, at your workshop, your weekend workshop, which is phenomenal, that it becomes automatic that every decision then you check in with your body. And I was in a support group last night where I was leading a workshop and people were talking and I could feel the energy getting a little bit away from us. Mm-hmm. Like the energy was getting derailed. People were going too deep into maybe places that might trigger other people. And I wanted to be like, whoa, 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 whoa. but I had to take a deep breath. I closed my eyes and I did this like 20-second meditation. Like, what feels right in this moment? What feels right to say? And I came back with less aggression and more compassion, because I wanted to shut it down, but I did shut it down, but in a way that felt kind and gentle for the person who was sharing. So the feeling thing is everything when it comes to this, especially when telling the truth. Even like, I want to say this thing, I want to tell this truth, I want to share my feelings. I often go to, what's the feeling after I've said it? What do I imagine the feeling will be after this thing? I'm through telling the truth, or I'm over, setting the boundary. And if it's good, I set that boundary.
I wrote down 2 things actually when we were talking earlier to make sure I came back to them. And one of them is something my friend Jade said many years ago that I think about a lot, which is that honesty without compassion is cruelty.
Yes.
So, truth telling is important, but like what you're saying, because I mean, back in my early 20s, I remember I used to just like say whatever and be like, what? Just being honest. And like, I was also being cruel and an asshole sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like that pause that you're talking about, like giving me a minute to consider. And what you're talking about is also like intent and impact. Mm-hmm. Like, what's the intention? Okay, I need to set a boundary here. I need to shift the energy of this. I need to like shut this down. But what's the impact I want to have? Because even though we might not be using shaming communication, being judgmental, what we can't control is that people will feel ashamed of their own behavior. And in some cases, rightfully so, right? Mm-hmm. But like, we cannot control how people will feel, but that extra little effort we make to set the tone and to do it from a better energy than just being like, this needs to stop. That makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference, and a very fine line to walk. And this is something that has to be practiced and learned. And I can't tell you how to do it now. Is people might feel ashamed for their behavior. Mm-hmm. And we can't be responsible for that. But what we can be responsible for is shaming someone because of their behavior. Yeah. And there's a difference, and it's nuanced and multi-layered and complicated, all that. Like last night in the group, someone was oversharing. They just were. I didn't want them at all to feel ashamed of what they were sharing.
Right.
That was super important. So I said, what you're sharing is so common. I've seen this so many times before. I want you to know that I see the humanity in you, and that is something to not feel shame about at all. But they had to know that it was inappropriate for the environment. Yeah, because it could hurt other people. And, the truth telling, truth without compassion is cruelty is so correct. And it's something that I have to examine all the time, because I was also one of those people like, this is all of me and you should accept me, and I'm worthy and I should be seen. But I am in this space with other people. And if I don't want people to do that to me, I don't want to be shocked and awed in all moments. I want people to be gentle with me. I'm a sensitive person, but I also want to know and love people for who they are. So I want people to be free to express themselves, but in a way that feels safe for me, for all of us.
The foundational basis of positive psychology has been said to boil down to 3 words: other people matter. Mm. That we are hypersocial creatures, and that the people around us influence us in a million seen and unseen ways. And as we were getting ready to talk about boundaries, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, how when we finally draw boundaries, create them, express them, and hold them, that it might be challenging at first, but the end result is that we have a lot more energy for ourselves. It's an energy preservation technique in a lot of ways. Like we stop putting out so much unnecessarily, and we stop taking in damaging or draining energy from others.
Other people matter. I love that so much. I was talking this morning on my live Facebook broadcast about how other experiences matter. Mm-hmm. The fact that there's 3 of us here, 3 women in this honest, open communication, and we do it offline every single day in our text messages, and we call each other for advice, and we hash through some serious issues together. in the context of very, very strong boundaries being set and always asking for permission, always checking on consent. And that I believe and know to be true, actually. That is why our relationship is so easy. It's why if there is conflict, which there has been, we move through it, not quickly because we need to process, but we move through it efficiently and without any kind of nonsense or real messiness or layering on of other junk. And I'm so grateful for our friendship because of that. Other experiences matter. If you don't have clear boundaries, if you're not willing to show up in truth and to accept other people's truth and to be kind about it, you are robbing yourself of the learning of being in true community with other people. I value this friendship. I know so much about you. I've learned so much from the both of you because of the way we've structured the friendship. If we didn't have clear boundaries and we didn't ask for consent and permission, our past conflicts would have destroyed everything. And I wouldn't have reaped any of the rewards of this interaction, of this relationship. So it is kindness. It's boundaries and truth are pure love.
Yeah. Self-love, other love. A little example from the three of us went away together to a little beach house weekend. And at a certain point, we all wanted to do different things. Mm-hmm. Like somebody wanted to stay home and maybe, I don't know, like Bex, maybe you stayed home and mm-hmm. went for a walk on the beach or whatever. Like we needed to do our own things. And it was so effortless.
I know.
There was no drama. Nobody was bitching about anybody else. Like, why isn't he doing this? I have gone away with groups of friends before where it's like, oh, why are we just not respecting everybody's needs right now?
But we established those rules before we went away.
We did. We had the conversation.
Yeah, we had the conversation, which you're the queen of. We had this conversation of like, what are our expectations for the trip? What do we want to do? What are our boundaries? And one of my boundaries was I want time to meditate. I want time to read. I want to be able to opt out of things because my energy gets low at night. Like really simple asks. But I know that in the past I would have been like, oh, they're going to get mad if I don't go to dinner. And I'm going to like feel like a party pooper because I'm going to bed early and they're up talking, or I wonder what you all be talking about. Are you talking about me? Because, it's like, and you're right. It takes so much energy.
Yes. Yeah. So now I know that you're using, this ICBD conversation
all the time.
Like all the time. We also use it all the time in our marriage, with our kid, etc. And it's just this constant ongoing check-in. What are your boundaries? How are those boundaries working out for you? Do they need to change? Did I step over them here because I'm not quite clear? Because sometimes we can't tell if we've done it to somebody else. Anyway, as an ongoing conversation, it makes life so much better.
So I want to ask both of you, because I always like, a video to end with, an action step or something that people can do to enrich their own lives, make their lives even a little bit better. And something that's easy, because I don't want anyone to feel like self-care is overwhelming them or personal development is overwhelming them. A tip that you would give someone, and I'll start with you, Elizabeth, if they're having trouble telling a truth, what would be the first step or how you visit it in your own lives? Because I know that you probably encounter times that you want to tell the truth and you're nervous about the outcome.
So I have a courageous conversation framework that I'm revamping, but I would check this. I think it's at untameyourself.com/conversation. My favorite part about it is that it walks you through some journaling before you even go to have a conversation or share a truth that you're nervous to share. And the thing I love about it is you get really honest about like what you are afraid of and what you're nervous about. Mm-hmm. And part of the suggestion is that when you're about to share it, that you tell the person, you're like, I'm really nervous to share this with you because I care about you and because I don't want this to happen. So you actually just say that, mm-hmm. because then what that does is it softens the other person. And it just puts the fear out there instead of like holding it and having it like underlying to the communication. You just go, hey, like, I'm a little nervous to say this because I don't know how it's going to be received. Here's how I mean it. And I can't hold this in. So I'm going to say this and then we could talk about it. it just like handles it. Kind of like part of that comes from my background in sales, where the context there is like handling the objection before it comes up. Because you're just like saying the thing like that we don't normally say, but we're really feeling. And so in saying it, we take the weight off our chest, off our heart, but we also open up the other person, because that is a way of being vulnerable in like a genuine way. This isn't like performed vulnerability. We're not trying to like hot wire connection, as Brene Brown calls it. We're literally just being honest.
Yeah, that's so much like what Alex teaches too. We're so much in alignment with everything that we do. But I thank both of you, because I had no idea how to have conversations. Alex, because you are in a situation, like you're married and you have a child. So how do you invite other people into hard conversations? That's a big one. Like I was dealing with this last night with a client who is struggling a mother-daughter relationship, and she's so afraid of the reactions of the other person and really, really wants to have an important conversation. How do you invite people in?
I actually like to give people a heads up, like not just saying, hey, I'm ready, let's sit down, right? Like they have no idea what's coming. Invite them to plan, hey, let's make an appointment. Let's go have tea on Saturday. I just really want to connect and talk with you about something. Mm-hmm. Like give them some advanced warning. Mm-hmm.
Do you tell them what it is?
Depends. Mm-hmm. Depends. You know, I've done it both ways, especially with my ex, where I tell him in advance, and sometimes I don't tell him in advance. Totally depends on my level of comfort, or even the amount of time we have to talk about setting up a conversation.
I'm big on the ambush conversation. I corrected that. Yeah, we made a video. It's like I would do the whole courageous conversation framework. Like I do that worksheet, and then I'd be like, and now I'm ready to talk about it. And I think that your piece is really important, and I'm glad that it followed. So prepare yourself for the courageous conversation, and then actually allow the other person to be prepared for it. Because
that's in the framework, by the way, girl. You were skipping some steps.
It's in mine too. It's in mine too.
Well, you know what that was? That was me just being completely blind. It was out of my awareness that I should allow people to be prepared for it. Like I want so bad to just, because I'm also a person who likes to win in conflict. Mm-hmm. That is, I admit that, and I am trying to work on it. I love to win, and I have to let that go too.
Can I add one more thing on that?
Yeah.
It comes back to, like, I want to dignify you in that for a moment, because I know you personally, and also I'm sure a lot of people listening, and I know Alex can also relate, and I can relate as well. If you're a person who has any history of, again, like being codependent or putting people's needs above your own, or over functioning or overextending yourself constantly, that urge, that instinct to just like say the thing when you need to say it comes from having stuffed your needs for so freaking long. It's just like, you're just at a certain point, you're just full, and it's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to explode, which is one of the reasons why boundaries are so incredible. Because if over the course of time you're in this practice, you don't reach that I'm going to explode if I don't say this right now place.
I love that. Yeah. It definitely comes from a place of survival, of needing to be heard, of desperation, and I want to let all of that go. I knew that you two would be amazing. So thank you so much. I learned from you. All of these videos are 100% self-serving, and I'm glad that people can watch though and learn something too. But it really starts with, what do I need to learn? And that's what I share. Thank you. I love you. Thank you all for watching. Please check out the links in the video description for everything that we talked about and more resources. I will see you soon in another BEXLIFE video.
So today is a Wednesday, and that means that I am bringing you more of a talk than a meditation. Mondays are for meditation, Wednesdays are for talks. It's where I answer your questions. We do a little activity, we have a little fun, and I get to jam with you on good stuff that's going on in my life in terms of managing my anxiety, symptoms of depression.